I think everybody has heard Didi's name 20 times today, and everybody is familiar with Jeff's work. We have really an incredible pleasure to be here. My name is Ross Boggess. This is Weston, and we get to host the DevelopLex podcast that comes out every other week, talking about community, economic, and real estate development. So today we're going to get started with a theme of myth busting and all about the site selection process that we all may think we understand, and there's probably things that we're going to learn today that our neighbors next door may not know. So welcome, Didi and Jeff.
Man, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
If y'all wouldn't mind introducing yourselves just a little bit, I think that would be best instead of me butchering how you'd like to be introduced.
Can I make a side comment real quick? Whatever they say, they both introduced themselves to me last night and left out some pretty big things. Didi was in Bloomberg magazine recently. That didn't get brought up until midway through dinner. So whatever they say right now, know they're leaving off a lot of things that they're probably too humble to say. So you can still introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Didi Caldwell, President and CEO of Global Location Strategies. I've been doing site selection consulting for manufacturing projects for about 26 or 27 years. And I've had my own company for, I think January 1st will be 17 years. I started my company in 2008, which was fabulous timing. Don't recommend it. But I lead a team that advises companies globally on where to place manufacturing capacity. And so sometimes these are expansions, but a lot of times it's greenfield, new capacity. And we have an office, we're headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina. That's where I live, but we have an office in Amsterdam. And like I said, we do work around the world. So here in Kentucky, I've done a lot of work. So some of the big projects that I've done is Constellium in Bowling Green. I also did the Diageo Bullet Bourbon facility not too far from here, right. Shelbyville, I think.
Yep.
And done a lot of work with Logan Aluminum and Novellis as well. So very happy to be here in Kentucky.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Bischoff, and I'm Chief Sales Officer for Gray Inc. I've been with Gray going on, it's hard to believe, but going on 25 years. Been in the business well over 30, and I've had the pleasure to call Didi a friend and work with Didi for a number of those years. So as part of my role at Gray, I'm responsible for overseeing all the business development and sales activity as well as the marketing. So I have a team of around 60 individuals across the country and overseas as well. We have representatives in, Korea, Japan, China, Germany, Austria, and Ireland, as well as located here in the U.S. So as most of you all may or may not know, Gray is an industrial design and construction company. We focus solely on manufacturing, distribution, food processing, food-related and beverage projects, as well as advanced technology and data centers. So again, in the course of my efforts, Didi has become not only a great friend, but a true ally for what we do, and we collaborate quite often. So, yeah,
I think it's very helpful for us in a project to have someone like Jeff and his team alongside us to help fill in some of the technical details about what it's going to take to develop a site, so that we can make a recommendation that will ultimately be easier for them to design and build on. The construction is not the only thing that goes into the site selection process, but it is a very important piece, and it gets the project off on the right foot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's establish a couple terms. Site selection and what that means in the spectrum, because that can be a 10-year long process from original thought to ribbon cutting. Mm-hmm. And then the caliber of sites. We're going to talk about mega sites. We're going to talk about the ideal client or the ideal site and what that scale looks like. Can you break that down to what that is?
Sure. So site selection, it's not really like my favorite term. It's just what everybody in the industry uses. I really like location advisory services better, because a lot of times we're not selecting a site. We do a lot of things before we select a site. So companies either internally or maybe they work with somebody like a McKinsey or a Bain or someone like that to determine where do they need capacity. how much additional product do they need to manufacture, and what is the market that they're going to serve. Once they have decided that they need more capacity, that's where we pick up. And so one of the first things that we do is we do location benchmarking, which might help them to determine what is the best country, the best region of the country, the best state, or even the best city or MSA in order to construct these facilities, and that is independent of a site. That helps us establish a search region, and then we're able to go in and specifically identify properties, which could be existing buildings, could be greenfield sites, they could be brownfields, and help them select those, do the due diligence, negotiate the incentives to the point where they can announce the project.
And then scale.
Yep.
Jeff, you've worked on massive projects that turn heads on highways down to just a normal distribution center. When you're thinking about projects, what's that scale look like?
Yeah, that's interesting. And to kind of pick up on the theme of the governor's conversation, and, if we use Blue Oval, for example, that's one thing we're extremely proud to be a part of that major project in Hardin County. It's the biggest project that anybody's ever seen, certainly in any of our careers that we've ever been a part of. So again, when you're looking at the scale of the project, obviously you want to come in. We have a ton of professionals at Gray from an engineering perspective that are extremely adept at sitting down, looking at all the requirements from a physical site location, looking at the infrastructure that's needed from a utilities standpoint and the rest as far as looking at transportation in and out of the site. So again, we work on the technical aspects when we team with Didi and her team to try to right size a project, try to determine what the site is needed, and then we'll hand that information off to her and her team, and they do the rest, obviously.
And if I may, just talking about scale, so like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And, when I first started doing this, $100 million project was huge. It was huge. Now $100 million is, not very exciting. I mean, you get excited about, I love $100 million projects, don't get me wrong. But, if it doesn't start with a B, it's not a big project.
Yeah.
And it's not just, we're sort of, we're not necessarily a representative microcosm of what's happening in the larger world. But if you look at the announced projects over the last, say, 15 years, in the 10 years between 2009 and 2018, there were 53 mega projects announced globally. And when I say a mega project, I'm talking about at least $1 billion and at least 1,000 jobs. There was 53 announced globally, and 27% of those were in the U.S. In the 5+ years since then, so going back to 2019 to the first half of 2024, there have been 135 mega projects announced globally. So almost 3 times as many in half the time period, and nearly 50% of those have been in the United States. So not only are the projects getting larger, but the geographic focus is changing as well. And so I'm not taking anything away from the Commonwealth of Kentucky because you guys have killed it, but it's also been, you've been able to seize that opportunity. The winds have been blowing that way. Yeah. And I don't, Jeff and I have been talking about this. I'm not really sure how long that's going to continue. Obviously, data centers, which don't count in that number because they don't employ 1,000 people, they're taking a lot of the air out of the room. But even for manufacturing, even if they're not as large, I still think we have a really long runway in terms of the manufacturing renaissance that's happening here in the United States.
So to put a little finer point on what Didi was saying, if you take into account that I've been in this business, again, over 30 years, I had never heard of or been a part of a $1 billion project until the last 4 years. When I joined Gray, we were doing about 165 to 175 million a year in revenue. Right now, we are approaching 5 billion. And it's just the growth, the size, the scale is just, it is unbelievable, what's taking place out there. So, yeah.
SVN Stone Commercial Real Estate is a full-service commercial real estate firm located in Lexington, Kentucky. Affiliated with the SVN International Network, SVN has over 200 offices across the globe. The SVN Stone team consists of experienced commercial real estate advisors in the heart of the Bluegrass. SVN helps their clients with commercial property sales, leasing, investments, and property management. Let SVN help you with your commercial real estate needs. Check us out at svnstone.com.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up question would be, we're talking about projects that have a B on the front of them. How do the conversations with those corporations actually start? I guess from both of your perspectives, but I know that at some point you weren't working on, transactions that large. How does that actually start, or what does the process look like for your all's process?
Yeah, so from our standpoint, obviously I mentioned on the outset that we have representatives located, throughout the world. And it's their job, obviously, to go find these opportunities, understand, the projects that are coming, and then make initial contact with the companies. It's as a design as well as construction company, we are in very early. When a company just starts, to Didi's point, when they decide that they need an investment, we are one of the first companies that gets involved as far as from the initial schematic design, from determining the size, the scope, and the needs of the company. So again, we'll send a team no matter where it is, in Asia, in Europe, wherever it may be. We'll send a team that can be as big as 30 to 35 individuals, depending on the complexity of the project, and they will sit down and scope out this project, put together the criteria, and then obviously, understand the opportunity, and then Didi's folks will get involved.
My approach is quite different. I just answer the phone. I don't mean to be flippant about that, but we don't have, we're a team of 20-ish people. So we don't have the resources to have business development people throughout the world. What we rely on is past relationships. So we have about 50% of our projects are repeat clients. Either the same company is doing another project, or maybe somebody that we worked with at a company has moved on to a different company and they're doing a project. And then the vast majority of the rest comes from people like Jeff
Sure.
that are out there and talking to companies, and they can't design and build a facility until there's a site selected. So to the extent that we can speed up that process and provide structure around it, because quite frankly, when companies try to do it themselves, I think they underestimate how challenging it is. And so we greatly rely on our wonderful relationships with people like Jeff to introduce us to those clients.
Well, Didi's being incredibly modest. She is the rock star of this industry, I assure you. And her reputation precedes. And folks naturally want to come and work with, the people that are the best at what they do. And I say this, again, not trying to curry favor or suck up, but Didi and her team are just absolutely the best at what they do. So,
Well,
It's okay.
heck,
You
I
can
think,
suck it.
I think Forbes called you the queen of
It was Bloomberg, and they called me America's Factory Whisperer.
that.
Yeah.
I'm still working on Forbes.
I've gone with the Taylor Swift of site selection. It's kind of,
So, Didi, you get to work both on the company side and then also help the cities. You whisper between the cities and the companies, too.
Yes.
So, looking at Lexington, we talked about where are we from a grade to an F grade.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I appreciate your answer last night. What was that?
Well, can I have a little intro to that? So
Unless
our mission,
it has to be brutally honest.
It will be brutally honest. Our mission and our purpose, the reason that we get up every single day, is to match companies and communities for mutual sustainable prosperity. And that is absolutely critical in everything that we do. So it has to be a great fit both for the company and for the community, because it doesn't do us any good to put a company in a place, in a community that they don't want them or they can't prosper as well, because the types of investments that we're talking about are generational in nature. If you look at, so my predecessor, a gentleman named Bill Dorsey, he did the site selection project for Logan Aluminum in 1980 in Russellville. And I had the pleasure of doing the aluminum rolling mill, which is the only one that's been built since that time for Novelis in Baldwin County, Alabama. So if anybody knows Logan Aluminum, I mean, they are growing strong, and that was, 45 years ago or something like that. So these are long-term investments, so we have to get it right. And when we look at all of the factors, and they're going to be different for every company, then we look at, what location, which includes, workforce and infrastructure and geographic position, but also the cost structure and the site, the specific site. Which location offers the best trade-off between cost, quality, and risk? So all things being equal, we would love to have a location that excels in quality. It's got the best site, the best infrastructure, the best workforce, best everything. But we would also like it to be low on investment costs and operating costs, and those things are not always work the same way. I mean, like my dad, he would always say, I have champagne taste and a beer budget. And then risk. So risk is location-dependent risk to your schedule, your budget, or your ability to start up and operate well into the future. If we can find all of those in one location, the decision is easy. But most often, it requires some kind of a trade-off. So our process is to help them understand the trade-off.
Develop Lex is also sponsored by Community Trust Bank. Hi there, this is Cam Dacey, Commercial Loan Officer at Community Trust Bank and an avid Develop Lex and Militech podcast listener. Community Trust offers a wide variety of home loans, commercial loans, and small business loans to suit your financial needs, as well as mobile banking, internet banking, and bill pay. Our friendly and professional staff would love to assist you at one of our 6 Lexington locations. Community Trust Bank is committed to building communities built on trust. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, subject to credit approval.
That being said, because I thought you might ask this question, so every year we do what we call insights reports, where we take an industry sector, and we rank all 384, I think it's still the MSA, the number of MSAs across the country changes a little bit, but it's about 384. So we rank those on these different criteria. So the 2 that I have in front of me right now are for metal manufacturing, primary metal manufacturing, so this is highly competitive. In the East South Central, which is like Kentucky, moving south all the way to the Gulf Coast, Lexington is number 8 in the region, and they are number 27 nationally, which means you're in the top 10%. And that's before we even look at sites, right? A site could cause you to shoot way up, or it could cause you to be eliminated if you don't have one. The other one that I have is for food manufacturing, and Lexington is number 3 in the region and number 8 nationally. So last night when I told you that, I think it was like I gave you a...
You gave me a B-, and that sounded a little bit like, oh, we like that guy, but he's a nice guy. He's not marriage material kind of thing. It's the, like, you're stuck in second place. Are we stuck?
I would give the Lexington region, for these types of projects, I would give it an A on cost structure. Mm-hmm. I would probably give it a B on a lot of the workforce characteristics and infrastructure and things like that. I think on the sites is where we struggle here. And to be fair, we struggle everywhere for sites. Sure. I mean, all those projects that I just talked about, the mega projects, they all landed on a site somewhere, and that site is no longer available to us.
So, Didi, I've plagiarized your saying for years. Plagiarized is a strong word. Maybe I've borrowed your saying for years. You always said that a mega site was a marathon and not a sprint. Mm-hmm. Do you stick by that today? You just said the mega sites have dwindled dramatically. The
mega sites have dwindled dramatically, and I've started to say it's more like a 10K.
Yeah.
So, sites that I looked at for 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years before they ever landed a project, it's really just how fast can you get them up and running. So the Novelis site that went to Baldwin County, I mean, they've been working on that. I think they acquired that in like 2012 or 2013. They put tens of millions of dollars in it through the Alabama Investment Tax Credit, which is a great incentive for to spur site readiness. But they put tens of millions of dollars in it, and it was a bridesmaid many times, but it was successful in locating this project. And that's just what you have to do. I mean,
Well-
once one gets taken out of the inventory, you got to be. It's too late to just start identifying one. You need to start identifying the backup whenever you're marketing the site that you have available.
Again, to Governor Beshear, to his credit, and I think many in the room can remember, when the mega site in Hardin County, where Blue Oval's located, when it was put together, I mean, we held on to that for what, Steve? 20, 25 years, 20 years, and it ran runner-up to Montgomery, Alabama, for the original Kia facility that located in Montgomery, and it sat there for that long. And again, it was kind of a white elephant. People really were scratching their head, and here we are, all these years later. Thank God we had it. In 5,000 jobs later, and the incredible investment that's Blue Oval. Again, to your point, marathon, not a sprint.
Lucas, I think I see you back there, Lucas Witt. So we worked with Roxanne and John Bevington and Will from Louisville Gas and Electric, Kentucky Utilities. It's always a mouthful. We worked with them a few years ago on, I think it was 2019, 2020 timeframe. It's kind of hard to forget that year. On a site identification project for all of their service territory in Kentucky. And we were able to identify off-market properties, so these are not places that had been previously identified or at least not developed for industrial, and we were able to, we identified something with our GIS system in Versailles. And I was just talking to Lucas earlier today, and they announced there's going to be a brewery, a distillery, a new distillery at that location. So that's an example of where, because that site might have come to fruition anyway, but being very proactive about, let's make sure that we identify new properties and get them in the pipeline so that we can start doing all of those studies that somebody was referring to earlier. I think it was Ted, it might have been you, that was talking about, you have to do the work to get it ready to invest in. It's not just a field.
Side note, it sounds like they're working on the next mega site right behind us
Yes.
right now.
Dang construction companies.
Craftsman Contractors is Central Kentucky's one-stop shop for roofing, windows, siding, and gutters. CraftsmanContractors.com/contact us will get you straight to the form you need so that their team will get in touch about your project. Or just text Stephen at 859-246-0108. When they finish your project, windows, siding, gutters, or roofing, you'll see what they mean when they say we build with integrity.
Real quick, because you did talk about just the longevity of a project. We're talking about 10 to 20 plus years spent on working on a site. Obviously, macroeconomic conditions will probably affect that, one would assume. One, I'd love you to speak into that in general, and probably more so where we are at today in terms of the macro and how that influences your all's process.
Yeah, so from my perspective, anybody that's been doing this in this business for an extended period of time, this is the golden age for what we do. I mean, there is, as far as activity, as far as the amount of opportunity that's out there, the projects, as Didi said, the size, the scale, just the number of opportunities that present themselves on a weekly basis. We've never seen anything like it. Again, I was reading an article a couple years ago, and it was akin to when the United States was gearing up to enter World War II, and the amount of industrial activity that took place back then. So right now it's just off the charts. I think it went, Didi, maybe 3 years ago, you would call the market white hot. There was so much. Maybe it downgraded a bit to red hot, and perhaps today it's hot.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that assessment?
I think that, yes, I would agree with that assessment. I still think it's pretty hot. It's somewhere between hot and red hot. We are extremely busy, and manufacturing, so since COVID, construction starts have gone way up. And manufacturing has, by and large, been contributing to that, and data centers, which is not really manufacturing, but has a lot of similar characteristics. You know, we're in a world right now where the geopolitical winds are shifting dramatically, and ever since the end of World War II, we have built this economic model on more and more globalization and more growth, and we've sort of reached a tipping point, right? And you know, places like Japan and Germany and China are depopulating because they're aging so quickly. You know, the geopolitical issues that we're seeing now, and the world is starting to shrink, and that's causing a lot of political instability, both at home and abroad, that a lot of my clients are very rapidly saying, we need to think, just the threat of tariffs alone, and not just a threat. We have tariffs that were implemented by the first Trump administration and left in place by Biden, and where they go from here is anybody's guess.
Right.
So I've got clients right now that are saying, you know, would you consider Mexico or Canada? And they're like, we're not even sure that that's safe. So that's happening. Then we had Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act that kind of threw kerosene on the fire, that kept things pretty hot. So I don't, you know, we have the right combination of geography, geology, demography, and the economy. And our economy right now is the envy of the world.
Yeah.
I know that if you turn on the news in the morning, they don't necessarily tell you that, but that is the reality that we're dealing with. And I don't see an end in sight. I think there might be, you know, some smaller projects, but I still think that we're going to continue to see strong activity. The headwinds are capital, availability of capital, because there are a lot of baby boomers are retiring. They're pulling their money out, which makes interest rates go higher because there's less money. Inflation, workforce, and do we have the infrastructure to support all of this? Which I would say that's sites, it's energy primarily.
So we have some of the best bankers. We have some of the best chief elected officials. We have some of the best insurance folks in the room right now. What can we do to get more sites?
It would be very self-serving if I said hire me, right? So I'm going to take my Global Location Strategies hat off for just a minute, and I'm going to put on my Site Selectors Guild Ready Sites hat on. So Site Selectors Guild is a group of about 65 global site selectors, and that represent the best of the best. And a few years ago, we started this initiative to develop a national standard for what it means to be investment ready for a site. We launched that program this year. I am the board chair of that new business. And I am happy to say that Kentucky, in our first round, we had 6 sites that we evaluated, and Kentucky had 2 of them. Kentucky Touchstone Electric Cooperatives, they were the ones that submitted it. And so it doesn't create a new site, but it benchmarks your site against all the other sites out there, puts it into a database where it can be found, because believe it or not, I mean, there's no central database for all the industrial sites in the United States. So at least we're trying to create a database of the investment-ready sites, and it's a place to be found. So if you've already done things like phase 1 environmental, and you've already extended the utilities, and you've done cultural and historical and archaeological studies, you've done the work that you need to do to go through this program, and you'll receive a score, and you can go anywhere from bronze up to platinum. Those were very original, you know, classifications that we gave it. I would say that is kind of like, it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, you should definitely do it. But beyond that, just continuing to work as a team to figure out where's the next property going to come from.
So I think I really appreciate both of y'all's perspectives, because you're everywhere. You work all over the country. And so really I'd be remiss to not talk about, you know, we're sitting at the Greater Lex Regional Summit, so our area in particular. What are some of the processes that you deal with on site selection and construction around the country that if our region were to try to implement those processes, what are some things that make your job easier? That's a better way to say it, that our region could partake in.
That's interesting. I think, of course, with every region, there's just, there's unique set of circumstances that each has. I've often talked and discussed, when you're benchmarking, who's doing it really well. Again, I do think, to Didi's point, when she kind of ranked the bluegrass location, the 9-county region here, I think we're doing it extremely well here right now. I think we are extremely blessed that we have perhaps the best economic development governor in the country. He's an exceptional salesperson, does great things. We've got some wonderful examples to follow right here in the state of Kentucky. Bowling Green, for example. I think the great work that they do in Warren County is exceptional. I don't know that there's anything to copy elsewhere. We're in a position right now. I was talking how long I've been in it, and Jen and I were having this conversation. Steve Byers, we can remember back in the early 90s, through the decade of the 90s, there was not a hotter state for economic development than Kentucky. Kentucky had groundbreaking incentives. They had the CRETA legislation that everybody in the country was trying to copy. Kentucky was the spot. And I really do think that we're kind of in that same position today. I think we're in a really good spot. So that's a long way to get to. I don't know if there's anything that I would change or maybe copy from anywhere else. I think just continue to be us.
So all of Gray's future projects are going to be in Central Kentucky's 9 regions.
Listen, I can tell you right now, we've got folks scattered all over the country that would love to stay home and sleep in their own beds. But
it is wild. I'm in the airport quite often, and there is always a Gray backpack getting on one of the Delta flights to Atlanta.
Yeah, we bought a few Delta planes, I think. I think we've got more diamond medallion status flyers than probably, we'd like to admit. But yeah, there's a lot of traveling.
I could come up with a couple of things. So I mentioned the Alabama investment tax credit, which is, a lot of times companies that are coming into a region, there'll be some kind of an income tax credit. Well, a lot of these operations aren't profitable for years to come. And so they can't really take advantage of those investment tax credits or job tax credits or whatever they are, however they're getting them. There are some places like Alabama that allow them to monetize that credit. And I'm not 100% clear on the mechanism, but say Alabama Power or CSX or someone like that will purchase those credits for 85, 90 cents on the dollar, which is a cash infusion to the companies that are coming in. But then they will also turn around that savings and put it into, so instead of paying, their own tax liability, they're able to take that delta, that savings, and invest it into sites. That's exactly what happened in the Baldwin County site. And I think it does two things. It makes the company that's coming in, it's a good incentive for them because it works almost like a cash infusion. And it also incentivizes existing companies to invest in infrastructure here in Kentucky. So I think that would be one thing. The other thing that drives me crazy, and I'm pretty sure Kentucky still does this, and there are other states that do this, is if it's not a big deal for the Lexington region, but when we're looking at Louisville or we're looking at northern Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, a lot of times the incentives only apply to Kentucky residents. We can't control, these companies can't control where their residents come from. Why don't, that to me is just splitting hairs and making it more complicated for everybody. So that would be something that I would very much appreciate.
Well, Didi, your answer got me thinking about one other thing. I guess there is perhaps something that we could do. I think some of the other states, I think South Carolina, for example, we got, James Chavez and his bunch are very aggressive when it comes to identifying sites. There's so many stakeholders that work within the economic development, the industrial development sector, that, some of those stakeholders, whether it's utility companies, railroad companies, things of that nature, I think we need to, they do a great job. Roxanne, all the rest of the folks do an amazing job. But it's just lean on those stakeholders to kind of assist in the site, bringing more sites to the table, investigating, working, just doing the due diligence.
And most states now have some type of a site development program. So Seeds in Alabama, they're putting money into actually developing sites. I think New York and the legislature, they appropriated $200 million. There was one site that I think even got like a $40 million investment, which I'm not saying that was the wisest use of their money, but they are putting their money where their mouth is.
I think a myth to bust is oftentimes you think, oh, if only we get somebody, can we then build out the infrastructure? That has changed to the infrastructure has to be there. And it's also a developer's responsibility to do it. And if the developer is the city or is a cooperation of different counties, there has to be that contribution beforehand. You can't just say, that's a good looking field right there. Yeah. We've got to have time, and I think that's what we're hearing is we need more sites. Our time was yesterday. Let's get started.
I have no suggestions, but did anybody write those suggestions down that they all just gave? No? Okay. Future tense. So we're sitting in year 2024 currently. How do you see both of your all's industries changing, both for the better and just changing in general? What do we have to look forward to as it relates to your industries?
Well, I'll go, and then, of course, Didi will have a much better answer than I'll give. But, the question brings me back to a point. Didi, if you look at how site location, how site selection has changed, we talk about the main driver right now is utilities, and we talk about the size of the energy use on some of these projects. Maybe speak about that, of what you think the number one priorities are now when it comes to site selection, and what you think that they'll be in the future.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. There's that way to look at it of like, what are the changing priorities of the companies? So like one of them I can use is just as an example is, so I did P&G's big flagship facility, manufacturing facility in West Virginia a few years ago, and sustainability was like, it was a place to fill in some information, but nobody really spent much time on that. And that was probably about 2015, something like that. Fast forward a few years, and it's all about sustainability, and particularly from the electric standpoint, my clients want, hundreds of megawatts. They want it carbon neutral, carbon free. They want it new to the world. They want it reliable, and they want it less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour. I mean, something's got to give. But the requirement of going from, tell us what your carbon content is, to it has to be green.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that. Now, I think reality's hitting them in the face.
Yeah, so to that point, that spurred, so we're building the new Lego manufacturing facility in Virginia.
That was a mega project, and just think about how many of those little blocks that you have to sell in order to get a positive return on investment for $1 billion.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Crazy.
I mean, we have built plastic injection molding facilities by the dozens. I mean, all over the country. But this, to Didi's point, we've never built one that is so, sustainable. The sustainability on this project is incredible. I mean, to say it's gold plated is an understatement. And the Danish do not mess around. Denmark does not. The folks over there don't mess around. It is, it is priority one for certain. Yeah, incredible.
So the size of the projects, the amount of power that they're using, and then the requirements on power is something I've seen just change with the industry. But the way that we do site selection, it's kind of a source of frustration for me, because I have reports that were done by my predecessor from the early 1970s, and it's on a typewriter. and it has an adding machine tape. For you millennials in the room, it was like a little calculator that had a tape, and it would print everything out. And you would do at least 2 of those to make sure that you were adding everything up, and it would have that staple to it. We're basically doing exactly the same thing. We're just using Excel and maybe some Power BI or Tableau or something like that. So I was completely fed up with it. I mean, it was driving me crazy. So in 2018, I formed a software company, and I built software to facilitate the entire process.
With over 800 data points. Is that right?
850 data points. It actually has unlimited because it's completely customizable. So you can, maybe the master template has 850 questions, but then you have 150 questions that are very project specific. So basically it's to collect all of the information from all of you economic developers, and which, by the way, all of you did not stand up, but I will tell you, you are an economic developer, even if it's not in your title, because you are you're in a business that can support the economic developers. You're a utility. You're providing some kind of a service. So we collect that information with this software, then it goes directly into our scoring models and our cost analysis, helps us get really to the short list really quickly, puts it all on a map. We can look at the GIS features and do desktop analysis. And then when we have another project looking in the same region, we don't have to recreate the wheel. We can go and look at what sites we already have. We can send out a new RFI where they can recall all the answers. How many economic developers here have RFI fatigue? I mean, it is real. And you're filling out the same information over and over again. So with this software, you don't have to do it. So I've spun that off into a separate company. It's available to all site selectors and all economic developers everywhere. And my hope is that we will adopt, the industry will adopt this as a standard, because I just want to make everybody's life easier. Ultimately, I think we're going to get to some AI kinds of things, but we're a long way from that. I mean, we can use AI for research and to write SOPs for how we do things, but the Site Selectors Guild actually conducted a study where they had humans performing a site selection study, and then they used 2 different AI models to do the same site selection study. And quite frankly, the things that the computer-aided model or that the artificial intelligence came up were questionable at best. So we're still a long way from that, but life is long, and I'm sure that I'm going to be very, very surprised by what AI can do in the next 10 years or so.